Hog, right? Battery powered, no loud pipes. This thing is a very different bike than anything Harley's ever made, not just because it's electric, but they went with the sporty styling as well and performance. It's really quick. It goes 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. That's as fast as a supercar. Basically feels like you're falling forward when you pull the throttle on this. And they do still call it a throttle, even though technically it's not anymore.
How are hog enthusiasts reacting to this debut?
Harley says its current customers are interested in this, even the guys on the big bikes and the gals on the big bikes. But really, they're trying to reach a new audience. They're saying 35 to 45 affluent. Now, this is their first electric motorcycle. They have several planned, but this one's the halo product, essentially saying, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we can do. We'll make different bikes coming forward. But they're trying to reach that kind of wealthy audience that's got the disposable income. They could buy something fun like this.
All right, so $30,000 price tag, and it's apparently going much faster, or at least somewhat faster and farther than it was originally debuted at CES. So it goes to from 0 to 60 in how many seconds?
3 seconds, and the range is now 146 miles. In the city, you go on the highway, it's going to be under 100. That's a lot more than 5 years ago when they released the original prototype for this. Now, there's some electric bikes that go further. There's some that are cheaper as well, but they're kind of selling the idea that, hey, this is a Harley. So it's well made. We've got this great dealer network, and this is enough to get you on a typical daily ride.
So 140 miles per charge.
Right.
Okay, so they're also offering free charging with the purchase of one of these?
Yeah, you get 500 kilowatt hours worth of charging at this network that they have, but you know, it's pretty cheap to charge it at home. It takes about an hour at one of these public fast chargers. If you plug it in on a 110 outlet at home, it'll be about 9 hours to fill it up, so figure overnight.
What's the top rival to this that's already out there, by the way, not by Harley?
Top electric brand is called Zero Motorcycles. They're a small brand. They sell a couple of thousand a year. This market hasn't developed at all yet. The other major automakers, motorcycle makers, don't sell electric bikes yet. So this is really a test case, not just for Harley, but for the motorcycle industry in general.
As far as the look and feel, it's a pretty simple design. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, they went with a sporty look. This doesn't look like anything else in the Harley lineup, but I'll tell you, when you're riding it, once you get past the fact that there's no clutch, you don't have to shift. And
I know you've seen it. Have you ridden it,
I
too?
rode it the other day,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
No,
okay.
Incredibly fast. It doesn't make the big burbly noise. It makes a whirring noise, but besides that, it feels like a regular bike. Once
0 to 60 in 3 seconds. Holy moly. All right. Gary, thank you. Nice to see you. Bill?
Fox News alert now. You heard it this hour at America's Newsroom. The Trump administration announcing new rules for asylum seekers as ICE starts raids across the country. Border Patrol's chief law enforcement officer is...
Trump and several progressive first-year lawmakers. Trump blasting the 4 Democrats at the center of a Twitter firestorm after triggering backlash with a tweet saying those lawmakers should go back to the places they came from and fix them. Hello and welcome to a brand new hour inside America's Newsroom on this Monday morning. I'm Sandra Smith.
Morning to you. You good?
Yes.
Solid. I'm Bill Hammer. Good morning, everybody. The president doubling down, saying the Democratic congresswomen are sticking up for people who are, quote, bad-mouthing America. He's demanding an apology. If Democrats want to unite around the foul language and racist hatred spewed from the mouths and actions of these very unpopular and unrepresentative congresswomen, it will be interesting to see how it plays out. I can tell you that they have made Israel feel abandoned by the U.S. I want to bring in our A-team right now. David Avella, GoPac chairman, with us now. David, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And Jessica Tarloff, Fox News contributor here in studio. Jessica, good morning to you.
Good morning.
As well. Look, I think he threw Nancy Pelosi a lifeline. There was a battle within the party itself, and now it's been overshadowed by this. Go ahead, David.
The president has actually made it harder for Nancy Pelosi because now you have 4 more members of Congress that want impeachment of the president even more. And they have all been for impeachment. As now they are all the more fired up to want impeachment. And this caucus and this speaker now has to figure out how she holds off a higher degree of talk for impeachment. When you add into the fact that now they have a compadre now in the presidential race with Tom Steyer, who made his living or made his name in politics on trying to impeach the president.
Jessica?
I don't think that's at all what's going on here or what people are thinking about today. People are thinking about the fact that the president unleashed a racist tweet storm against 4 duly elected congresswomen, 3 of whom were born in America, saying go back to where you came from, head back to Detroit, head back to Boston, head back to Cincinnati. And then, of course, Ilhan Omar, who's a Somali refugee, is also an American citizen. This is the next round of birtherism, which started out as racism as well. Both Donald Trump and Melania Trump have peddled that against Barack Obama. It's disgusting. It does unite Democrats in opposition to him. So I guess maybe you could say, as Bill that you were, that this will bring them together and maybe have us move past the fracturing that was happening at the end of last week. But the focus needs to be squarely on the President of the United States of America, who is using racist tropes against people of color in this country. And that is why his approval rating can never get past this certain level. We keep going back to this, the Central Park Five, birtherism. It is unacceptable.
It's the Dems are very selective in who makes comments about others that are racist and who's not. Now, these four
is
members,
that racist? What do you say?
These four members can certainly say what they want about the President of the United States, and many Democrats say far more hateful things about the President of the United States, and that's okay. But the president makes a comment, and somehow he becomes all the words and xenophobic and racist that the Democrats like to pin Republicans on. But Jessica dismisses this discussion about what this does to Democrats. So Democrats are already united in many ways against this president. Where they are most divided is on whether they should impeach him or not. And here is the problem for Democrats. They know, people like Nancy Pelosi know, that independents don't want to see impeachment go through. Despite what they think whether the president did something wrong or not, they don't want impeachment. They want it focused on issues. And every day Democrats talk about impeachment is a day closer the president is to being reelected.
But still, Senator Lindsey Graham was on Fox this morning, and he was taking the back of the president on much of this. But he also had a warning to President Trump. Here's Lindsey Graham.
AOC and this crowd are a bunch of communists. They hate Israel. They hate our own country. They're calling the guards along our border, the Border Patrol agents, concentration camp guards. They're anti-Semitic. They're anti-America. Don't get down. Aim higher. We don't need to know anything about them personally. Talk about their policies.
Talk about their policies.
Senator Graham makes a good point. The more we hear about the four members of Congress, particularly Alexandria Cortez's views, the less suburban voters like what they hear from her. Her unfavorables are extremely high, as we found from a leaked memo to the Democratic caucus, that her name ID is high, as is her unfavorable views. The more we focus on their bad ideas, the better it is for the Republican Party.
Here is Ilhan Omar, who's in the middle of a lot of this, okay? Apparently over the weekend she had a comment about how she feels about her level of patriotism and how perhaps it's misunderstood. Watch.
I believe, as an immigrant, I probably love this country more than anyone that is naturally born. You ask anybody in walking on the side of the street somewhere in the middle of the world, they will tell you America the Great. But we don't live those values here. And so that hypocrisy is one that I'm bothered by. I want America the Great to be America the Great.
So here's the rub in the comment. We don't live those values here. And that's what many people hear that come from her as a freshman member of Congress.
That's all well and good. None of these women are running for president. I mean, Republicans would love to make 2020 about AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley to some degree. It's about the people that are running for president. It's about this president's policies as well, Donald Trump's. To Lindsey Graham's point, you know, I saw a clip of him back in 2015.
Just come back to her point.
No, but it relates to this.
Hang on. We don't live those values here. That's what she said.
She's talking about, I mean, she's at the Netroots conference at the same time that ICE is ready to go out on these raids, which now they would like us to call it ICE enforcement. She's saying that these things are un-American, that we are not doing as well as we could be. And there are a lot of Americans who agree with her. She has been very clear when she came to be sworn in. She was talking about how her story is only possible in America, that a Somali refugee could come to a country and become an elected member of Congress.
You're not addressing what she's saying. I apologize.
No, I am.
No, she said you ask anybody walking on the side of the street somewhere in the middle of the world, they'll tell you America the Great, but we don't live those values here. That's what I am addressing it explicitly
and gave you an example that for her and for many, these ICE raids are us not living by this example. The way the president represents us on the world stage is not living by that example. The way that we treat people downtrodden, the poor, that is not living by the example that we should be.
What the administration says is that these people came here illegally and they've committed more crimes against Americans, and those are the people who are targeted in these raids. So, look, I want to move on. Ken Cuccinelli broke some news with us last hour. Just want to get to that right now.
On those new asylum changes, here's Cuccinelli at the top of our show this morning.
Remember, asylum is about safety, not a choice of forum. It's not forum shopping. The idea is that you want to get people safe, and this is something America's been very generous about in the past, and yet it's being fraudulently abused right now, and it's part of what's causing the crisis at the border.
So those asylum seekers must now show that they applied somewhere else first, a safe country first, David.
What the administration is seeking to do is to make asylum what it truly is. It's for those who are being persecuted and tortured, not used as because someone wants a better economic reason to get to come here. We saw reports this weekend about DNA testing shows many of the families who are claiming to be families aren't actually relatives who are trying to come across the border and use asylum. And ultimately what this administration is trying to do is enforce the law. And what Democrats owe all of those coming here illegally is a roster of every other law they don't have to obey because they got here because they didn't obey the law.
Well, it seems the message is stronger than the actual execution of the process. Like the bark is bigger than the bite, because in some of these cities that we read over the weekend, some of these major American cities, there have been no reports of any ICE movement inside the city.
Yeah.
So you wonder if the message is being sent down through Mexico to Central America that
we'll see what happens. They're supposed to go on over the course of a couple of weeks. It was only the kickoff yesterday on Sunday. I think that the fact that information got leaked ahead of time to the New York Times about what these deportations were going to look like, and the idea that we could have collateral deportations, has scared off probably a lot of people who were implementing them. DHS Acting Secretary McAleenan has said that he is concerned that families are going to be separated. But we have seen this morning Guatemala has already pushed back on the safe country policy. We'll see what the other Central American nations that are supposed to participate in this do. But I just want to say something about this ICE enforcement argument that they're making. Since 2007, we have had 500,000 more visa overstays than illegal crossings. ICE is not going into South Boston and rounding up Irish people. They're not going to Bay Ridge and picking up Russians. They're not asking questions about Melania's Slovenian.
So they're racist.
They are rounding up brown people, and they are separating families, which is only going to make that crisis at the border, which Mike Pence couldn't even make eye contact with when he visited on Friday, even worse.
Here's the bigger question down the road. Is Joe Biden the Joe Biden of the Obama administration, who carried out these very deportations that Jessica is screaming about over here? Is he the Joe Biden of now the Nancy Pelosi no border policy and all these Democratic mayors across the country who are actually trying to hide people here illegally so ISIS can't?
Speaking of Biden,
them.
throw up the latest 2020 polling on the president up against those potential 2020 contenders. Joe Biden in a potential matchup would beat the president 51 to 42%. This is NBC Wall Street Journal polling. Bernie Sanders 50 to 43. Here's Bernie Sanders on why he says he will win.
Let me tell you why we are going to win the Democratic nomination. The working class of this country is sick and tired of working longer hours for lower wages. They're sick and tired of 3 people in America owning more wealth than the bottom half of America. Sick and tired of 50% of American workers living paycheck to paycheck.
Interesting to see Bernie Sanders making that economic argument up against the president. But those top 4 2020 contenders, Biden, Sanders, Warren, Harris, in that new poll, do beat the president in a potential matchup, David.
It's not surprising that this is going to be a close race. This is always going to be a close race. But a big development happened last week, and I wrote about it, and it's on FoxNews.com today, about how Tom Steyer's entrance is a big problem for Joe Biden. Because now here's $100 million he says he's going to pledge to pushing a Green Deal, a impeachment, a illegal immigrant message that is what helped bring him to notoriety.
We'll see how
politics.
much. We'll see how much oxygen he gets in that. Final word on this, Jessica.
I sincerely wish that Tom Steyer had pledged $100 million to help Democratic candidates, especially down ballot. We need to continue to focus there. Those 2020 matchups are important. The question of electability and how people do against Trump are what voters are focused on. Our number one priority is defeating Trump. And right now we have 4 people that looks like they could do it.
Thank you both.
Thank
you.
David Abella, Jessica Tarlock.
Thanks to both of you. Fox News Alert. House Democrats reaching a deal with former special counsel Robert Mueller to delay his testimony by 1 week in exchange for more time for questioning. Meanwhile, White House officials slamming the House investigations, accusing Democrats of staging a political circus.
I expect that very little will come out because Director Mueller himself said that his report is his testimony, and he told the whole country within the last 6 to 8 weeks. Oversight has a function, but I think Americans are watching the waste of taxpayer dollars with a bunch of comb-overs doing a big do-over that we don't need.
Kevin Cork has more from Washington for us this morning. Hey, Kevin.
Great to be with you. You're right. In addition to that delay that you just talked about, Sandra, very important, Director Mueller will now get up to 3 hours to respond to questioning, and that's going to be a key, especially with so many Republicans hoping to obviously get a crack at him and what was in that 448-page report. As you know, the appearance has been delayed from the 17th to the 24th. That is, by the way, and this is huge, just 2 days, Sandra, before Congress goes into its 6-week summer recess. Mueller, of course, has said he's not going to stray a lot from his already voluminous report on no collusion, by the way. Meanwhile, over on Capitol Hill, Republicans say they're ready for a more fulsome explanation, if you will, from the former FBI director. In fact, they accuse Democrats of just trying to hurt the president.
This is all politically motivated. Does anybody really think Jerry Nadler is trying to get to the truth, or that he'll do a better job than Mueller? This is just another effort to destroy Donald Trump. It will blow up in their face.
Lindsey Graham added that when the IG reports come out in the coming weeks, GOP lawmakers will have even more questions about the origins of the Russia probe. But Democrats say this is about getting to the truth. Even if that means hauling Mueller before Congress, so be it.
What he can do is bring to life the Mueller report. I don't care. Some people say, oh, well, he won't go beyond the four corners of that document. There's so much within the four corners of that document that the American people do not yet know that I'll be delighted if he can help us bring to life.
Congresswoman Madeleine Dean right there. By the way, this sets the stage, guys. Keep this in mind, too. The Democrats want to get Mueller on the record, on camera, as perhaps a basis to move forward with impeachment. Interesting times here in Washington. Mark your calendars, the 24th. Can't get here soon enough for those of us who think it might happen. We'll see. Back to
if
you.
it sticks.
It'll come quicker than you know. Kevin Cork, thank you.
Kevin, another alert right now. We're hearing from downtown New York, here in Manhattan. A judge will not decide on bail for Jeffrey Epstein today. Brian Yennis is watching that hearing live in New York City. Brian, what do you have?
Bill, good morning. We can now confirm that the judge says he's going to make his decision on bail this Thursday. We also know that there are victims inside the courtroom and that reportedly he said that they can all speak, or anyone can speak in the hearing if they choose. Prosecutors want Jeffrey Epstein to be denied bail and to spend the rest of the trial in detention for reasons outlined in recent court documents. The government argues Epstein is an extreme flight risk due to his extreme and extraordinary wealth and deep foreign ties. They accuse him of having a history of intimidating witnesses, and they say he is a current danger to girls, pointing to thousands of nude photos of children recently found in his New York City mansion. Also, at least a dozen new victims have come forward since he was arrested. Investigators say Epstein is worth more than $500 million and owns 2 private jets. Prosecutors say they have new bank records that show days after the Miami Herald published its investigative piece on Epstein in November, the financier tried to silence witnesses by making 2 hush money payments to 2 co-conspirators, one for $100,000 and another for $250,000. A witness in 2008 also claims their father was run off the road by a private investigator hired by Epstein. Now, one attorney we spoke to says Epstein is more likely to cooperate with the government if he's actually denied bail. Take a listen.
People very often are more likely to start talking and cooperating when they're inside a detention center than when they're on the outside awaiting trial. So depending upon the results of the detention hearing, Epstein might decide that it is in his best interest to start talking to the federal government.
Epstein's defense team says their client is not a danger to society and should be on house arrest inside his $77 million New York City townhouse. They've offered the mansion and private jet as collateral. They've agreed to electronic GPS monitoring, surveillance cameras, and 24/7 private guards, and a promise to deregister his private jet and 15-plus vehicles. The defense also says, Bill, that there is no flight risk, they claim, because Epstein hasn't fled the country in the 14 years since allegations first arose. Bill?
Brian, thank you. It is breaking news from here in New York City. Brian Yennis on that now. Thanks.
Breaking news from the State Department now. We are learning that another American tourist has died in the Dominican Republic, the 11th to die recently while on vacation there. We'll have new details on that straight ahead.
Also, some severe flooding and tornadoes, Sandra, still posing a threat to millions along the Gulf Coast. How state and federal officials are responding at this hour for many. Coming up.
I, for one, am extremely grateful that the forecasted rains and flooding, the risks, the threats that had been forecasted. And again, we're thankful that the worst case scenario did not happen.
It was a really long weekend for those folks down there. Hurricane Barry downgraded to a tropical depression now, still posing a risk to many crawling north across Louisiana. Slow crawl, too, with that, including potentially life-threatening flash flooding and possible tornadoes. Mike Steele, the Communications Director, Louisiana Office, Homeland Security and Emergency Management, is with us now. Sir, good day to you. What do you think the folks who live in your state need to know right now about this storm?
Hey, good morning. Well, I guess first of all, we still have significant rainfall impacting some parts of the state from southwest Louisiana up through central Louisiana. There's been a heavy band of rain overnight, and it continues this morning, and it's impacting those areas. So we understand that there's a lot of people that are still stalling out vehicles, and they need to be rescued. There's also a request to get some high water vehicles up to that region. So we're not out of the woods yet, but at least we had some better than anticipated things happen, you know, as far as the coast is concerned.
Such as what? Less of a storm than you expected?
Yeah, so there were some concerns about the surge. We have a high Mississippi River level that we've been dealing with basically since the beginning of the year. And so there were concerns about that being impacted, as well as heavy rainfall projections that never really kind of panned out across South Louisiana. There were still a number of areas impacted by the storm itself when it made landfall. So Governor Edwards is actually traveling to 3 different locations across South Louisiana. I believe you guys are involved with that trip as well. And so he's going to be taking a look at that damage and see what steps need to go beyond there. But we've had great cooperation from our local emergency managers all the way through FEMA. They've kind of been with us every step of the way, and so it's good to see all the wheels in motion like they've been the past few days.
We're all thankful for that, because the rescue efforts, as you said, are ongoing. We know 3,000 Louisiana National Guard have been deployed throughout the area. Can you tell us a little bit more about the ongoing efforts to rescue those in trouble?
Some of the rescue, there really haven't been significant rescue numbers. So again, it looks like everyone was prepared. We did have the 3,000 Guard personnel activated. We've helped distribute about 900,000 sandbags around the state. And that's another thing. We really saw the public step up and understand their role with this event. We're kind of moving into the heart of hurricane season now. So this likely won't be the only, threat we face this year. So it's good to see the public do their part and help us get through this.
Strange storm, isn't it? Started in the Midwest, moved south, across the Gulf of Mexico, became a hurricane, and now it's moving so slow across your state. Last comment on that, sir.
Yeah, that's right. You know, it started in Missouri, moved over to the southeast out in the Gulf, and now it looks like it's going back to Missouri. But, again, we're asking the public to really be careful. There's a lot of great resources to check your routes ahead of time. 511la.org. Go to that site. And please don't drive through any flooded roadways.
Path sort of described as a boomerang. Mike, we really appreciate your time this morning. We know you have a lot of work to do. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Earl Tracy Jerome Jester Jr. out of Georgia died in mid-March of a respiratory illness. He suffered from lupus, and it's not immediately clear whether or not his death is directly connected to the others. At least 11 Americans have died in the DR since June of last year. Many of them tourists staying at some of the high-end resorts on the island.
These are individuals who have come to this country illegally. had the opportunity to make an asylum claim in front of an immigration judge, and most of them chose not to avail themselves of that opportunity and didn't even show up for their first hearing. At this point, we have no choice but to go out and execute those lawfully issued removal orders from an immigration judge.
That was the acting ICE director explaining the targets of those current immigration raids. Over the weekend, immigration authorities carrying out smaller scale raids than expected. Those raids coming as the White House puts new asylum rules into place. Joining us now, Brian Hastings, Chief of Law Enforcement Operations at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Great to have you on this morning. First, can you respond to those new rules just announced the 9 o'clock hour Eastern time this morning on those new asylum rules?
So from a Border Patrol standpoint, I mean, we support anything that's going to help with this current crisis. We've been very transparent about the crisis for the past 8 months. Our numbers are astronomical, still continuing to, we saw a little downfall in June. We're sitting at about 723,000 apprehensions so far this fiscal year. Last month at 94,000, which was a little relief compared to the May numbers, but still the highest June on record since 2000.
Ken Cuccinelli broke the news with us, as Sandra referred to a moment ago. Here is what he said about the numbers right now on the border.
We have a grant rate of asylum right now of barely over 10%, Bill. That means almost 90% of the people pouring themselves into our asylum system really don't have a shot at obtaining asylum in this country, and they're clogging the system for legitimate claims of persecution.
So what he's describing there is the number of people coming to the border. But this new policy would make them prove that they appealed already to Mexico City or appealed already in Honduras or Guatemala. What do you think the practical effect of that asylum law could do?
So we're hopeful from the Border Patrol that it will affect those astronomical numbers that I provided earlier. And we've seen, as I said, positive effects already from MPP and from what Mexico has done. But still, I mean, when you're sitting at 94,000 apprehensions in the month of June, those numbers, that's the highest we've seen since 2000. And we need all the help that we can get. Our agents are overwhelmed. The entire system is overwhelmed with this current crisis. And the biggest concern that we have is the pull from the national security mission. So when you have 40 to 60% of your agents still dedicated to dealing with this current humanitarian crisis, that comes at a cost to border security and thus national security.
I want to go now to these ICE raids and what we are hearing from mayors in some U.S. cities who are vowing to protect those illegal immigrants in their cities. This is Lori Lightfoot, the new mayor of the city of Chicago. She published this in the Washington Post, saying the threats and realities of stepped-up enforcement have not had the deterrent effect you intended because the people you are targeting are not actually the problem. Mayor Lightfoot writes, any such efforts by ICE in our city will be met with fierce resistance from Chicagoans who have been organizing tirelessly in their communities and with an unshakable resolve to stand with and never against our immigrant neighbors. How do you respond to a message like that from the mayors of one of our largest cities?
So I think that's probably better suited for ICE, but I can tell you it's very hurtful to hear some of the rhetoric that we've heard out there attacking our Border Patrol agents who for months have been doing a mission, the humanitarian mission that they weren't hired to do, letting the national security border security mission suffer because of that. And it's to be politicized and to hear the rhetoric that we've heard attacking our Border Patrol agents, quite frankly, is disappointing and hurtful for the agents in the field who are trying to do the best they can with the resources they have.
Yeah, just one more thought on this. Mark Morgan was out on the Sunday shows talking about family separations. Here is his comment on that.
The design is not about family separation. That's not the intent. Never has been and never will be. But all I can tell you is I support this 100%. This is an essential consequence that we need to apply to help take that element away, that pull factor, so they'll stop making the dangerous trek and risking their lives.
So perhaps that has some effect there. And I know a moment ago you referred a question to ICE. However, just reading from this article from CNN, as of early Sunday evening, there were not any confirmed reports of migrants being apprehended in Baltimore, Chicago, or New York. For the most part, quote, it's quiet, according to a spokesperson in Illinois. Is the message here to go strong on putting the word out there, but not necessarily following through with the apprehension?
Again, I work for CBP Border Patrol, so that's probably a better question for ICE. But as I've said before, we're doing everything we can within our means legally to affect this flow that is overwhelming our resources. And until there's a change to some of the legislation, the outdated loophole legislation, Flores TVPRA, until those are addressed, we're doing the best we can with the resources that we have.
So we will see if the new asylum rules have an effect. Sir, thank you so much for your time. Brian Hastings with us in Washington, D.C. Thanks.
Well, it isn't dead yet, and we are totally committed to keeping the Middle East denuclearized. If Iran acquires nuclear weapons, then other countries in the region will acquire nuclear weapons. It becomes a very, very toxic and dangerous situation.
That there was the British Foreign Secretary explaining the state of the 2015 nuclear deal amid reports Iran has surpassed its limits on uranium enrichment, rising tensions, Strait of Hormuz. This is a story that could be with us for some time. Trey Yinks live in Jerusalem for the latest today. Trey?
Bill, as Europe continues to look for ways for Iran to get around U.S. sanctions, European foreign ministers met today looking for a diplomatic solution to the rising regional tension with Iran. European ministers meeting today at the European Union meeting taking place in Brussels just hours after France, Britain, and Germany issued a statement warning that the 2015 nuclear deal was on the verge of collapse. The participating parties in the event today urged unity from the international community in encouraging dialogue between Washington and Tehran. The U.S. pulled out of the nuclear deal last year before reimposing sanctions on Iran. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said over the weekend that his country would be open to talks with the United States if sanctions were lifted. Otherwise, Iran plans to break another commitment in the nuclear deal every 60 days, a move that would bring Iran closer to obtaining weapons-grade material.
Iran is still a good year away from developing a nuclear weapon. We think there is still some closing but small window to keep the deal alive, and that's what I'm here to talk about.
The comments by British Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt come as tensions remain between Britain and Iran after a British seizure of an Iranian oil tanker near the Strait of Gibraltar earlier this month. Britain now says the vessel will be released as long as it's not headed to Syria. The Iranian ship is suspected of violating EU sanctions by attempting to deliver 2.1 million barrels of light crude oil to the Assad regime. An Iranian government spokesperson said Sunday that Iran suspects the ship will be released. Now, as the U.S. continues to increase pressure on Iran, the Iranians do say they will continue to violate terms of the nuclear agreement. Thus, the standoff continues. Bill?
Trey Yinks, thank you from Jerusalem today.
All right, a look at Wall Street an hour into trading. The Dow, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 each rising to all-time highs when trading began 1 hour ago. The Dow hovering around the flat line there, sharply unchanged. A lot of quarterly earnings reports coming out. We'll see where things go, but record territory for the U.S. stock market.
You tell them, Smitty. Here we go, right? Plus, the mayor, Pete Buttigieg, saying Medicare for all and free college is not realistic. What's that about? Is he right? We'll get into that with the money man, Charles Payne, who knows the numbers. Next.
I do think that we should be realistic about what's going to work, and just flipping a switch and saying we're instantly going to have everybody on Medicare just like that isn't realistic. Policies that we're being pushed to do say that we can pay down the last penny of tuition for any student, including the child of a billionaire. These are things that are questionable on their merits, and of course also pretty far out from where,
Sanders,
among others, pretty far out from where Americans are.
South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg breaking away from the progressive pack on some high-profile issues. Charles Payne, host of Making Money, Fox Business Network, here to talk about this. Hello, sir.
Yeah, he said pretty far out, and not in the old groovy kind of way either, right?
Questionable on their merits was the quote.
Yeah, and what he meant to say, it costs $100 trillion. That's what's so questionable about it. But he's also, in a way, trying to have it both ways, I think. You know, listen, you can sense that a lot of the moderate candidates are trying to form or find their own lane and move away from the complete socialism rhetoric of the Democratic Party. But he's talking about Medicare for all who want it. I'm not sure how that works and how that would be necessarily different. Debt-free college for low-income families with a federal-state partnership, not necessarily free college for everyone. So he certainly has moved a step away. It still, though, could be sort of pie-in-the-sky kind of stuff when you start to crunch the numbers.
And don't forget large increases in Pell Grants to provide basic living expenses.
Right.
I don't know. So where is he compared to his competitors?
Well, I mean, you know, to the ultra left, you know, we're talking about a $93 trillion just on the Green New Deal. But again, I think what they're starting to do is they're looking at some of these surveys and they're starting to say maybe the loudest voices in our party don't necessarily represent the party, and now not necessarily afraid to start to put out policies against that.
All right, Amazon.
I heard somebody talking about Black Friday in July now. Like, can we not talk about Christmas yet? However, Prime Day for Amazon, workers going on strike. What's happening there?
You know, Amazon, this idea was really started by Alibaba in China called Singles Day, and it's become a real holiday there. It dwarfs anything in America. It will dwarf even Prime Day, where you have these big sales, people go online, they shop. So Amazon, though, has picked it up. Prime Day, it wasn't their biggest day last year, but it is a big recruiting day for them. And apparently, if you go on Amazon the next couple of days, you'll get all these discounts and bargains. And of course, the idea is for people to become members.
It's like in the middle of summer, they've created their own retail holiday.
Yeah, and a really down, soft period. But, you know, on the flip side of this, around 3 o'clock, you do have some workers who are going to go and do a walkout at Amazon.
So apparently, here's your worker pay. Minimum wage in Minnesota, $9.86 per hour. Amazon, minimum wage, $15 an hour.
There was an organization that covered a couple of warehouses in the UK last year, and you know, this stuff kind of goes beyond money. And what they found is that these workers were working 10-hour shifts. Many of them were afraid to take bathroom breaks. In fact, 74% of them said they wouldn't take a bathroom break.
Well, it's the number of boxes per
it
day
keeps going
that
up.
they have to pack.
It's gone from 150 to 250. So again, they said the management was abusive. They were constantly in fear of being fired. 55% reported being depressed. 57% reported being more anxious. So, you know, listen, Amazon last week, we remember they said they're going to spend $700 million to retrain workers. They went to $15 fairly quickly. But there are other issues.